Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday, July 30th. I'm John Weigell here with Katherine Laidlaw, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. The podcast industry is absolutely booming right now, if you're on top of it. Podcast revenue is expected to hit $2 billion this year and get close to $2.6 billion by 2026. But most of that money is going to the top performers. Think Joe Rogan, the Kelce brothers, Trevor Noah, and Alex Cooper of Call Her Daddy fame. So why don't smaller podcasters see more funds and growth compared to these giants? And how do platforms like Spotify and Amazon manage their exclusive contracts? We'll get to that in a bit, but first let's give you the hits and headlines today in business and tech. First up, McDonald saw same-store sales drop about 1%, the first decline since 2020. The chain, which has tried to lure diners back with their $5 meal deal, reported a Q2 net income of $2.02 billion, which is down from $2.31 billion last year. And Katherine, you've spoken about McDonald's on this podcast before. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was surprised to see this because I know that there's been a push to sort of offer more value to consumers, not just McDonald's, like Wendy's, A&W.
Oh, yeah.
A number of chains have sort of opted for bolstering their value options again, sort of to combat, like rising cost of living, inflation, that kind of thing. And so I wonder if we will see a turnaround in Q3 as there's more data post the new menu options. And if not, then I wonder if we'll see continued added value for consumers, which would be awesome. I would love a $3 meal deal.
Right. That would be nice. Don't you miss the days where you would go to McDonald's and get like 3 things for $3 and now you go get 3 things and it's $16? So it kind of brings back the affordability that we're all accustomed to thinking that fast food is and was. So I hope this doesn't deter them from continuing that campaign. We'll see, I guess, if those prices go from a $5 meal deal to a 20 very soon.
It's going to go one way or the other, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll be prepared. Our wallets will be enforced.
In pain.
In pain, yeah. Deep pain. Speaking of deep pain, an Ohio Supreme Court ruled that boneless chicken wings can, in fact, have bones. The decision came in response to a man who sued a restaurant after tearing his esophagus on a 2-inch chicken bone in the, quote, boneless wings he ordered. Katherine, I may ask you, is there no justice in our world?
I mean, speaking of deep pain, this story gives me deep existential pain. Like, can we trust nothing if not the boneless chicken wing label? Like, even that?
That is insane to me how this court case got turned on this man. It's a very easy to win court case in my mind of it said it was boneless, so I assumed it didn't have bones.
I feel bad for this guy on a couple of levels. Like, he's got to be questioning some stuff right now.
Yeah, me too, as I am. So if you're out on your way to Buffalo Wild Wings this weekend, just, give those boneless wings a quick fork poke before you put them in your mouth, just in case.
Eat with care.
Yes. Up next, TikTok rolled out a sound search to select users. It's a feature that allows them to hum a tune to identify a song and videos that use it. Remember, Google tried to do this. I tried to use that a few times, and it just didn't work. So hoping this one does. Over to federal debt. Over 1 million Americans now owe over $200,000 in federal student loan debt, which is up from $600,000 in 2017. Experts attribute the rising cost of education, especially among grad students. And more on federal matters. A federal court ruled that border agents in the Eastern District of New York can't search phones without a warrant, stemming from a 2022 incident which a man's phone was searched at JFK Airport. So no need for a lock screen anymore because it's illegal to get in there anyways. Great. Okay, on to our main story. Today, our big story takes a bit of a turn towards the meta as we're talking about the podcast industry. Right now, there are a few big players on the top backed by Spotify, Sirius, and Amazon that are pretty much dominating the entire industry and pulling in millions of dollars. But we're just wondering here how we got to this point. So, Katherine, to start, what are some of those blockbuster shows being talked about and how much are they making roundabout?
Yeah. So when we started looking into this story, I couldn't believe some of the numbers that were getting thrown around. You mentioned Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy podcast. She is getting ready to ink a $100 million deal with Sirius. Joe Rogan signed a deal with Spotify worth up to $250 million. Trevor Noah, who's really well known, his show does really well. He's in talks to re-up for a second season with Spotify as well. And as the self-appointed Taylor Swift correspondent of our team, I would be remiss not to mention that her boyfriend's show could be next in line. The Kelce brothers' New Heights podcast, as they're the number 4 podcast in the US right now. And they're also in talks to sign an allegedly $100 million deal. And so the numbers that are being thrown around are enormous.
Yeah. And these podcasts, all very, very popular, of course, though are a bit of a drop in the ocean comparatively to the amount of podcasts that exist. I mean, podcasting has become such a form of art and expression these days. You can make one just with you and a microphone in a room. So there are tons of podcasts. How many are there, Katherine? Do you know?
Yeah, so this also I found totally shocking. I'm an avid podcast listener, as many people are, but I was surprised to learn that there are actually 450,000 active shows that have published recent episodes, according to Podcast Industry Insights. So you've got 450K shows, but it's the top 25 podcasts that reach nearly half of US weekly listeners, according to Edison Research. And so it truly is, there's like a massive podcast out there, and it is a tiny, tiny grain of rice in the entire rice bowl that is actually reaching people.
Yeah, that's a pretty massive statistic that only 25 of these podcasts are the ones raking in half of the audience. Not surprising, but definitely an interesting statistic. And a lot of these podcasts seem to be signed to one publication or another. A lot being signed to Spotify as being exclusive, a lot signed to Amazon and Wondery and Sirius. So how exactly are Spotify, Sirius, and Amazon and companies of that ilk involved in this kind of starification process?
Yeah, so starification process is the perfect way of putting it, because this has sort of grown over the last few years. And what they're doing, especially with their top talent like Alex Cooper, Joe Rogan types, they have tours and merchandise and multi-year exclusivity deals. They are experimenting with selling subscriptions for their top shows, which has seen some success. They're making video versions of podcasts, which I know smaller podcasts have experimented with doing as well. And one thing that I found really interesting was that they're selling more ads to bigger brands like car manufacturers and alcohol distributors. I don't know if you remember this, but in sort of years past, the ads in podcasts were so particular to that industry because they were always these really sort of like niche startups, like mattress makers, like Casper, mindfulness apps, like Better Health. I can still hear the ad in my mind, or like meal delivery kit companies were really popular. Mm-hmm. And so these were sort of smaller companies with smaller ad budgets than like a BMW or a Home Depot, for example. And so now bigger companies are willing to buy in, but only at the very, very top level. And so companies like Spotify and Amazon are negotiating those deals with their top talent as sort of the bill attached to that.
Yeah. And, this great article from Wall Street Journal that we're getting a lot of this information for also mentions the blunders of some of these platforms as well, right? Because they had all these successes and are having these successes with a lot of podcast people, but are also kind of learning from their mistakes. Do you remember that one podcast that was supposed to happen with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle?
Sure do.
It was supposed to be a big deal, and it had a single episode. So they're definitely learning to protect themselves from these huge losses, and that's making them a lot more money going forward, it looks like.
Yes, and I think it's allowing them to sort of like know better how to reinvest in the talent that is creating episodes that are reaching listeners' ears. I remember thinking $20 million, that is quite a return on investment for Harry and Meghan. One episode later.
Right.
And, Spotify's former VP of creator content and partnerships said in the Wall Street Journal article that you reference, like the business model used to be really simple: create a new podcast, make a deal, sell ads. But now you've got all these other sort of diversified income streams that I think are just making the industry more livable, at least if you really hit it big or if you already have a celebrity following.
Yeah, right. And for some people, it seems like hyper livable.
Beyond beyond livable.
Beyond.
Extremely lucrative is a better
Way livable. Like it's too
putting
easy.
it,
Yeah. But yeah, it seems like there's some great statistics here as well about just how much money the podcast industry is generating. And this is pretty insane to me as well. Do you see the numbers on this? It says they're looking to make $2 billion by this year.
Yeah, and that's just ad revenue, which is also so surprising to me because we've really come a long way from like the BetterHelp, go to therapy days of yore.
Right. They really expanded. And kind of getting back to the conversation about the publishers, a lot of these publishers are constantly looking for new talent, new podcasts, especially ones that can really, really break the bank for them. Kind of like how Wondery from Amazon is pursuing the Kelce brothers.
Yes, exactly. And another thing that they're doing too that I find really interesting as a journalist is they're really sort of looking at podcasts as a way to potentially become hits in other mediums. Film, TV, books, and you're sort of seeing a story that has legs or that can carry a podcast series then being shaped into something in another medium, which I think is cool and just offers more opportunity for collaboration between, like the Netflix or the YouTubes out there with these bigger podcast publishers as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, long story short, there's a lot of money to be made in podcasting, especially if you ink a deal with a Spotify or a Sirius or an Amazon, and they just blow you out. They put you on tours. They give you merch. It's pretty insane how the podcaster has become very similar to the rock star in these days.
It might even be likened to the Super Bowl of podcasting.
Wow.
I had to. This was terrible. I'm so sorry.
Our Taylor Swift correspondent, everybody. All right. Thanks, everybody. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage on our newsletter. If you're not subscribed, go get yourself signed up at thehustle.co/email, and we'll see you tomorrow.